Radio Sussex.
Call 0800 232 1045.
BBC Radio Sussex.
Now it's time for our lunch break guest, and delighted to welcome onto the show our guest today, who is a best-selling author, award-winning stand-up, a presenter, and a mental health campaigner as well. Dave's recently been named, this is Dave Chawner, he's recently been named as the new patron of the Oakleaf Enterprise mental health charity based in Guildford. Now, Oakleaf strives to make a positive impact on hundreds of individuals in the county struggling with their mental health. And this is something that Dave has been very open about. I've spoken to him on a number of times, and Dave, nothing is not open for discussion in your comedy, really, Dave, even those areas that we might think were taboo subjects.
I completely agree. I think that actually, if anything, comedy should be where we are talking about mental health, because I think, you know what, it actually breaks down those boundaries. It transcends things like class or gender or race. And actually, it also makes people human as well. I think some of the things that people feel most vulnerable about are the most relating things anyway. So it boggles my mind why comedy doesn't talk about mental health a lot more.
Now, I know your story because we've met and spoken on a number of occasions, but you, it was eating disorders and in your experience of anorexia, which inspired you to include this in your comedy. And you're unusual because we don't necessarily associate eating disorders with men.
Well, I mean, this is what's really interesting. It's coming up next week is Eating Disorders Awareness Week, and the theme this year is men with eating disorders. And obviously there's a range of eating disorders. You've got anorexia, which you've had people, the likes of Billy Bob Thornton, Dennis Quaid, Christopher Eccleston, they've all had anorexia. And then you've got bulimia, which people like Elton John, Russell Brand, Uri Geller have also talked about. But I think it's really important to not leave out, there's one that doesn't really get the airtime as much, called EDNOS, which stands for Eating Disorders Not Otherwise Specified. That actually makes up 50% of eating disorders. And I do think that a big reason that we're not talking so much about men with eating disorders is because a lot of people with EDNOS are blokes. And I do think that it can be absolutely overlooked. And whether that is because people are embarrassed, whether that's because people don't associate them with men, or just maybe, similar to me, it might be that people don't realise that they have a problem with food.
There's something very brave, though, when something has had such a huge impact on your life and it's such a personal journey in taking that onto the stage and sharing that with an audience. I mean, I know you've done this on a number of occasions, but the first time you did it, were you a little apprehensive, particularly given that it is unusual to talk about this in a comedy environment?
Well, you know what? Being completely honest, when I first started doing this, the humour was kind of a foil, a sort of distraction of like, look at what the left hand's doing so you won't realise what the right hand's doing. And it's taken ages in order to actually kind of sensitively use comedy in order to not only talk about the anorexia and the habits associated with it, but also in a helpful way that isn't just something that's a misdirection. And actually, one of the things that is such a joy to work with Oakleaf is I've come up with this initiative called Comedy for Coping, which is aiming to teach stand-up to people with mental health problems as a method of building that communication that I didn't have, to build that connection with other people, to combat loneliness and give them confidence. So I'll be honest, I didn't really think of it as brave at first because I wasn't really actually talking about it. I was much more talking around it. And it's taken me years to actually get into the nuts and bolts of what it was like and why it was there. But the one thing that I absolutely will say is the thing that has made it by far and away easier is that 99 people out of 100 have not only been supportive, have not only been lovely, but it's also been amazing how many, skinhead, tattooed blokes that are massive have come up to me afterwards and gone, fair play, mate, I actually really struggle with food too. And it's, I'm not going to lie, it's really combated a lot of my misconceptions about what someone with an eating disorder might look like.
It's a difficult balance, though, isn't it? Because ultimately we come along to see your shows to be entertained. So how do you get that balance right between sort of spreading awareness, but actually also doing a show that, because you tackle a lot of issues that people think, oh, come on, this one, veganism, adult circumcision, the things that you wouldn't normally think that you'd get in a show environment.
I think it's like when you're doing like a club set. So if you're doing 20 minutes and people have come for like a stag do, I wouldn't lead with, right, let's talk about mental health. But if people are coming to like, say, an hour-long show, I think that's very different and it's a lot more intimate. But I think a lot of it as well is just being realistic. Stop being so hoity-toity about it. A story that I always tell, which is absolutely true, is that as part of the eating disorder, I was obsessed with exercise, and I was constantly exercising when I was living at home, and I was running up to my bedroom doing sit-ups, squats, push-ups. And when I was writing the show about the anorexia, I said to my mom, did you ever know anything about the exercise? And she said, well, Dave, in our defence, when your teenage son keeps on running up to his bedroom and all you can hear is rhythmical banging or repeated grunting, tend not to. And it's those sort of moments that, like, really, I find the humour in people talking cross purposes.
There is a humour to be had in some of the darkest moments in life, actually, and you're in the midst. You've got a very, very successful career. I know that I've told you before, I was terribly excited when I went to the Edinburgh Festival one year, and there you were, your big cheesy grin beaming from a poster. So you've done Edinburgh, you've done a lot of Brighton, you've done a lot of TV appearances. What's next for you? What in terms of your show?
You know what? That's a really interesting. In terms of the comedy, I'm really excited of doing this Comedy for Coping, and I'm working with a wonderful academic called Dr. Dieter Leclerc at the University of Kent, and we've just done some qualitative analysis about how helpful it's been for the participants to go through this, because it was a grant that we won from the British Academy, and the preliminary findings are really exciting. Someone actually said that they found this course of like saved their life, which is never anything that I thought that I would potentially be able to do. But to anyone that's down near Brighton, I'm also, and this is my next ridiculous project, I'm doing a stand-up show trying to cover the history of Western philosophy. So, I mean, I don't know why I don't go for more.
Dave, what are you thinking about? That sounds impossible. That sounds like there's a lot of work goes on there, lots of research. Where do you even begin with that?
Well, to be honest, I love BBC's Horrible Histories, right? I think it is one of the best things that's
me
ever been
too,
made.
yes. It's brilliant, isn't it?
I think it's incredible, and I never liked history at school, and I was lucky enough to study philosophy, and the thing that really annoys me about philosophy is people always think philosophy is really academic and fusty, and it's not. It's some of the funniest stuff out there, and some of the stories, there's a great story about Diogenes, who is was an ancient pre-Socratic philosopher, and he hated Socrates, and Socrates once said in a lecture that man is nothing but a featherless bird, and Diogenes thought it was absolute guff, so he waited until Socrates' next lecture, and he brought a chicken with him that he'd completely plucked, threw it in Socrates' face and went, "Behold, I give you man." And I'll be honest, Sarah, I've had some tough heckles in my time, but nothing that hard. And I think those sorts of stories are what really engage me about philosophy.
Yeah, and this is it, isn't it? That bringing something unexpected. I sometimes wonder what goes on in your head, because you do seem to kind of deliver sort of some unusual topics to your audiences.
I think a lot of people worry what's going on in my head, but I remember when I first watch stand-up, the thing that got me was, yes, it was fun. Yes, it was engaging. Yes, it was great to go out with my friends. But the thing I absolutely loved the most, and it took me ages to realise this, was that all of the comics on stage were actually talking about really dark things, whether that's being broke, whether that's being single, whether that's being lonely, whether that's about being neurodivergent, whatever it was. And they managed to take that, play with it. And the thing that I always say about stand-up is it's not about trying to fit in. It's about standing out and celebrating that. And I just thought that was such an amazing thing, that these people would look like absolute freaks if you saw them in the aisle in Tesco. Imagine bumping into Russell Brand in the street. But when they get on stage, they celebrate that difference. And I just think that's what makes for such an exciting circuit. And, it's also worth saying as well that if not my show at the Brighton Fringe or any other show, it's been a really tough time for everyone. Go and see some comedy, because I genuinely do not think there is anything better for mental health.
Oh, absolutely. Now, tell us about your latest involvement then. So you are involved with this mental health charity in Guildford. Tell us more about that.
Oakleaf is a brilliant charity. So anyone that is down in Guildford, it is absolutely worth checking out. It has been it's been set up since 1995, and the idea is to transform people's lives who have experience of mental health problems, to build their skills, build their confidence. But the thing that I love so much about Oakleaf is it's about helping people return to the workplace. So a lot of the time the whole narrative can get a little bit kind of caustic, but this is helping people help themselves. So it's not only building their personal skills, it's building their professional skills as well. So there's work-related training, well-being activities, counselling services. And I just think that if we focus more on getting people with mental health problems back into work and supporting them, then that would make the whole economics a lot richer place, and people could talk about that in their employment and bring a completely different side to the office environment. So it's absolutely brilliant. And their website, if you Google Oakleaf Guildford, it will come up, and they are, I can't ever best enough.
So much has happened and has changed over, since you started talking about mental health as part of your shows. We're talking about this more. A lot of change. There does seem to be, we do seem to be moving in the right direction.
There has never been a more exciting time for mental health. We have never been better at mental health in the history of humanity. Isn't that just incredible? And I think it's really important to say as well, we're talking about mental health, because of course 1 in 4 people have mental illness, but 4 in 4 people have mental health. And it doesn't always have to be about depressing statistics or sob stories or talking about waiting lists, etc. It can just be about talking about health. You don't have to wait before you become unwell before you go to the gym. Why do we always wait to become unwell before we talk about our mental health? And I think good mental health is one of the best things in the world, and celebrating that and holding on to it, that's what's really important.
Well, next time you're in Brighton, come in and say hello, won't you? Come in and talk to me about your show, because I've missed out. I haven't seen you for ages, and it'd be lovely to see you face to face again. It's been an absolute pleasure having you as our lunch break guest. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Sarah. Pleasure as ever.
Really good to talk to you, Dave Chawner there. And do look more about that charity. It's Oakleaf Enterprise. If you put it into your favourite search engine, it will come up.
BBC Radio Sussex.